It is still dark, an hour before dawn, and the roads are already full. From every direction, out of the black countryside, they are coming. Farm carts creaking under sacks and cages, pack horses swaying with panniers, women balancing baskets of eggs on their heads, drovers cursing softly behind sleepy cattle, a girl carrying a goose under each arm, an old man wheeling a barrow of cabbages through the mud. Ahead of them, over the dark fields, a town is waking. Watchfires on the gate towers, the first bells ringing, and inside the walls, in the wide street at the town's heart, men are setting up trestles and poles by lantern light, unfolding the little wooden city within a city that will exist for one day only. Because today is market day. If you want to understand the Middle Ages, truly understand them, do not start with kings or battles. Start here, in the pre-dawn crowd at the town gate, because market day was the heartbeat of the entire medieval world. It was the one day every week when town and countryside collided, when the village sold its eggs, cheese, wool and pigs, and bought its salt, iron, cloth and news. It was the stock exchange, the shopping mall, the job centre, the newspaper, the courtroom, the theatre and the marriage market of ordinary life, all compressed into one roaring street between sunrise and mid-afternoon. For most medieval people, market day was the biggest thing that happened, week in and week out, in their entire lives. It was where they touched money, met strangers, heard news of the world, tasted anything new, and watched the law bite cheats in front of a delighted crowd. Today, we are going to live that day from before dawn to after dusk in a middling English market town in the year 1350, through the eyes of the people working it, policing it, and enjoying it. Using advanced AI trained on the market charters, court rolls and toll records of medieval towns, the regulations that governed every loaf and pint sold, the archaeology of marketplaces, and the work of historians who have reconstructed the commercial life of the age, we have rebuilt market day in full. The gates are opening. The tollkeeper is yawning at his table. Get your penny ready and let us go in with the crowd. First, understand what a market actually was, because it was not simply a bunch of stalls. A market was a legal machine, and the town guarded it like treasure. No medieval town could simply hold a market because it felt like one. The right to hold a market was a privilege, a franchise granted by charter from the king or a great lord, specifying the day of the week and the place, and these charters were valuable property, fought over in courts, because a market meant money. Tolls on goods coming in, rents on stalls, fines from the market court, and the general enrichment that came from being the place where the countryside's wealth changed hands. Towns competed for market rights. A new market too close to an old one could spark decades of legal warfare, and the crown spaced grants out deliberately so that the whole kingdom was covered by a honeycomb of market towns, each the hub of the villages within a comfortable walking day, roughly the distance a peasant could travel in, sell, and travel home before dark. That is the first thing to see in our pre-dawn crowd. Almost everyone in it walked here this morning, some from 5 or 6 miles out, and will walk home tonight, which is why market day starts brutally early and why the serious selling is done by mid-morning. At the gate, the machine takes its first cut, the toll. The tollkeeper at his table takes the small customary payments from outsiders bringing goods to sell, a coin here, a measure there, everything set by ancient custom and bitterly known to the penny by everyone who pays it, while the townsfolk themselves and the men of privileged villages waving their exemptions pass free. Grumbling, paying, showing their baskets, the countryside funnels through the gate, and the street carries them all to the same place, the wide market street, or the great triangular marketplace at the heart of the town, presided over by the market cross. The market cross deserves a moment because one still stands in hundreds of towns today, and most people walk past without knowing what it was. Part landmark, part pulpit, part symbol, the cross marked the sanctified, law-governed ground of the market. Under its arms, bargains were sealed, proclamations cried, and the market's peace, a real legal concept, protected everyone trading beneath it. Around it, by first light, the temporary city has risen. Rows of trestle stalls under canvas and board, each pitch rented from the town, arranged street by street according to trade. The fishmongers here, where the smell can blow away, the butchers in their shambles there, with gutters running, the corn sellers by the cross, the cloth dealers along the dry side, poultry and dairy where the country wives gather. Everything has its place, and the place has its rent, and the rent is written in the town's book. The bell rings, the market opens, and now come the rules, because nothing about this roaring street is a free-for-all. Medieval market trading was regulated to a degree that would startle a modern shopper, and the regulations tell you exactly what people feared: hunger and cheating. Begin with the strangest rule of all, the one that governs the first hours. For the opening of the market, in many towns, ordinary households get first claim on food before the dealers may buy. The crime being prevented has a wonderful name: forestalling, the offence of intercepting goods before they reach the open market, buying up the carts on the road at dawn to resell dear later. Alongside it sit its sister crimes: regrating, buying in the market to resell in the same market at a markup, and engrossing, cornering the supply of something to drive the price. Medieval law treats all three as a tax on the community itself, because in a world where the harvest could fail, hoarding and price rigging on food were not sharp business. They were dangerous, hateful, and punished in public. Then the bread and the ale, the two staples of every table, governed by the most famous consumer protection laws of the Middle Ages, the assizes. The assize of bread tied the weight and price of every loaf to the current price of grain, adjusted and proclaimed, so a baker could not shrink the loaf when wheat rose. The assize of ale did the same for the brewing that half the housewives of the town practiced. Officials tasted, weighed, and measured. The ale tasters, sworn men who sampled the new brew, the bread weighers with their scales, the keepers of the standard measures, bronze gallons and bushels kept by the town as holy writ, against which every trader's measures could be checked and sealed. And when the checks caught someone, the market provided its favourite free entertainment: punishment. The baker whose loaves ran light, the brewster whose gallon was short, the butcher who sold fly-blown meat, the fishmonger with yesterday's catch sold as today's, faced fines first, for the court rolls show endless small fines working like licensing fees, but repeat and flagrant offenders met the town's theatre of shame, dragged through the streets on a hurdle with the offending loaf hung round the neck, or set in the pillory in the middle of the market. Head and hands locked, name and offence cried aloud, while the crowd, whose dinners had been cheated, supplied commentary and worse. Rough, public, humiliating justice, staged at the busiest hour in the busiest place, precisely so that everyone, buyer and seller alike, would remember that the market's peace had teeth. This was the great bargain of market day. Come in from your village and you could trust, more or less, the loaf, the pint and the yardstick, because the town's own officers and the town's own pillory stood behind them. It was law made local, visible and edible, and people believed in it because they could watch it work. Now walk the stalls at mid-morning, when the market is at full roar, and take in what is actually for sale, because the goods of a market day are a portrait of the entire medieval economy. Start with the country produce, the reason the town eats, grain by the sack and bushel, the corn dealers testing it in their palms, eggs, butter and cheeses from the village wives, who sit with their baskets in their appointed rows and are, quietly, some of the shrewdest traders in the street, live poultry protesting in wicker cages, vegetables in season, cabbages, leeks, onions, peas, honey and wax, apples and pears in autumn, and the livestock at the market's edge, pigs, sheep, a few cattle, changing hands with slapped palms and God's penny, the tiny coin that sealed a bargain. Then the town's answer, the crafts, the reason the country comes, iron things above all, knives, sickle blades, nails, pots, the smith's stall ringing, leather, shoes, belts, harness, pottery stacked in straw, wooden ware, bowls, spoons, rakes, candles and tallow, and cloth, the great commodity of the age, from coarse local russets to, on a good day, imported colours that draw a crowd just to look. Around the edges, the sellers of small wonders, ribbons, pins, mirrors, spices in tiny precious twists, pepper and ginger sold by the pinch, salt by the measure, salt being no luxury, but the very technology of winter survival, bought seriously by every household. And threading through it all, the services and the hustle, the barber-surgeon pulling teeth to an audience, the scribe writing letters for a fee, the pardoner with his papers, the beggars at the church porch, the pie sellers and cookshop boys crying hot food through the crowd because market day fed its own crowd as it worked, and the smell of pies, roast meat and fresh bread rolled over the street all morning. Listen too, because the market was the medieval internet. News arrived here and nowhere else. Prices from the next county, war rumours from a packman, a royal proclamation cried by the bellman at the cross, gossip of roads, plagues, prophecies and princes traded stall to stall as busily as eggs. Bargains everywhere followed the same beloved ritual: offer, refusal, outrage, counteroffer, the summoning of witnesses, the final theatrical surrender, and the handshake, for a bargain made openly before witnesses in the market's peace was as binding as parchment. Coins passed, silver pennies, halfpennies, farthings cut from them, tested between teeth, counted into palms and purses, and the purses themselves watched, because where money gathers, so do the cut purses, sliding through the press with little knives for the strings, and the town's constables and beadles shouldering after them. By noon, the serious business is largely done. The country folk have sold their loads and made their purchases: salt, iron, cloth, news, and the day begins its long, happy slide into its second act, which is pleasure. Because market day was never only commerce, it was the week's festival, and the afternoon belonged to it. The taverns and alehouses around the marketplace, and the alewives' houses marked by the ale stake, the pole above the door showing a fresh brew, have been filling since mid-morning, and by afternoon they roar, sellers celebrating their takings, buyers sealing bargains with the customary drink, neighbours from scattered villages who meet only here catching up on a week of world. Deals continue over the ale, softer now, matches are half made between families, quarrels are patched or started, and the ale taster's work is tested by the gallon. Outside, the entertainers work the crowd, for every market drew them like gulls behind a plough. A fiddler or piper by the cross, a ballad singer selling songs of outlaws and marvels, a juggler, a performing dog, or, on a great day, a bear, a quack doctor selling cures with a speech worth the penny on its own. Children, brought along by the cartload, run wild in the one weekly carnival of their lives. Young men and women, scrubbed and in their best, promenade and eye each other, for the market was frankly understood as the place where the young of 20 villages could actually meet, and many a medieval marriage began with a look across a poultry stall. The church keeps its own stake in the day, market day braided through with the parish's life, the porch where contracts were sworn and bans were cried, the churchyard to the clergy's periodic fury, doubling as a trading and lounging ground, and the great feast days of the year swelling ordinary markets into fairs, the market's giant cousin, when for days on end merchants came from far countries, and the little town briefly touched the trade of all Europe. And through it all, the town watches and collects, the clerk of the market with his rolls, the stall rents tallied, the tolls counted, the fines from the morning's court entered neatly, so much from the baker, so much from the forestaller caught on the road, so much from the affray by the fish stalls, the whole day's raw reduced by evening to careful lines of ink that would survive 7 centuries and become, for historians, the very windows through which we now watch these people live. By late afternoon, the tide turns. The stalls come down as fast as they rose. The trestles are stacked, the canvas folded, the pitches swept, for the town must be a town again by nightfall. Out through the gates flows the countryside in reverse. Carts lighter, purses heavier or lighter as the day decreed, baskets now holding salt and nails and ribbon instead of eggs, cattle sold and staying behind, a new pig trotting home on a string, children asleep on sacks, the day's news riding home to 20 villages to be retold at 20 firesides, the roads busy in the dusk with the whole dispersing world of the market. Behind them, the town counts its silver, the taverns sing on into the evening, and the marketplace stands empty under the cross, a wide, quiet space with trampled straw and cabbage leaves, waiting out the week until the little wooden city rises again. That was market day, and now you can see it whole, not a quaint scene, but the engine room of an entire civilization. Once a week, by charter and bell, the medieval world assembled itself, the countryside walking in at dawn with food and wool, the town answering with iron, salt, cloth and law, the tolls at the gate and the standard measures by the cross, the assize watching every loaf and the pillory waiting for every cheat, the shrewd wives in the butter rows and the drovers at the beast market, the pennies tested between teeth, the bargains sealed under witnesses, the cut purses and the constables, the pies and the ale, the fiddler, the gossip, the sweethearts, the news of the world crossing the street faster than any post, and by dusk, the whole thing folded away into carts and account rolls until the next week. This was how ordinary people met the economy, the law, the news, and each other for 500 years and more. The market town spacing of the old countryside, one hub within walking distance of every village, still shapes the map of Europe. The crosses still stand in 100 town centres. The very phrases of the market, by hook or by crook, a baker's dozen, born, it is said, of bakers terrified of the assize and throwing in a 13th loaf, still live in our mouths. And something else still lives too, and you have felt it if you have ever wandered a street market anywhere on earth. The specific human electricity of the market crowd, the mingled smell of food and animals and money, the cries of sellers, the theatre of the haggle, the sense of a whole community briefly gathered in one place with its goods and its gossip. That is not nostalgia. That is one of the oldest continuous human institutions, older than most nations, and the medieval market day was its golden age. So the next time you pass a town square with a weathered stone cross or a street sign that says Market Street in a place where no market has stood for centuries, stop for a moment and repopulate it. Put the trestles back up. Ring the bell. Fill it with the dawn crowd from the dark roads, the ale stakes and the pillory, the butter wives and the ballad singer, the silver pennies and the smell of pies, one day a week, every week, for 500 years. The castles ruled the Middle Ages, and the cathedrals prayed for them, but the markets ran them. And on market day, for a few loud hours between sunrise and the homeward dusk, the ordinary people of the medieval world owned the middle of the town, and the whole age did its business face to face, penny by penny, under the cross.